Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another episode of In the Frame. A few weeks ago I did an In the Frame episode of 20 examples of colourful colour films. So now I'm going to do 20 examples of the blackest and whitest black and white films, which sounds as ridiculous as doing a colourful colour film video. But sense has never got in my way from doing videos before. So these are 20 examples of films that when you think of black and white films, these spring to mind. You know, there's filmmakers who are just better in black and white than colour, and vice versa. And there's films you can't really imagine being in colour, because there's just something about the subject matter perhaps, or just the way they look, that you couldn't really imagine them being in colour. Again, this is not a definitive list. This is not a comprehensive list. This is literally just 20 examples for me that kind of epitomise black and white films. There are strange people out there who just refuse to watch black and white films because they're not reality, as if colour films are reality. Just like the way there's people refuse to watch films that are subtitled. But let's make a start. I've tried to just do one film per director, because obviously there's certain directors in a year that you could list 10 films that they did in black and white. Might as well start with Touch of Evil by Orson Welles, one of the blackest and whitest black and white films ever made. You could make the tenuous argument that Orson Welles started film noir with Citizen Kane and ended film noir with Touch of Evil. Touch of Evil is just so dark that it could only be in black and white. You couldn't imagine Touch of Evil in a colour film. The murkiness, the dark water at the end of the film, the darkness of the corruption, like Hank Quinlan. For years some people didn't realise it was Marlene Dietrich in the film with her black hair. It's just a wonderful film, and it is a perfect example of a really black and white film. Obviously Orson Welles, you could have had just about all of these black and white films in this. The Trial would be a good example as well. Next is Georges Franju's Les Yeux Sans Visage, or Eyes Without a Face. And this one again, you couldn't imagine it being in colour. Obviously there's certain scenes which in colour would probably banned. The specific scene where you think there's no way he's going to show it, and he shows it. There's a poetry to Franju's film about a surgeon who wants to replace the face of his daughter who was damaged in an accident by getting a Ledia Bleak to run about town killing young women and taking their faces off, which could be like a sleazy slasher, and has been ripped off several times in the years that have passed since Les Yeux Sans Visage. But again, because it's black and white, it has that poetry to it. It's a dreamlike, trance-like film. When Edith Scobe is dancing around with the dogs at the end of the film when they're released. There is a fairy tale poetry to the film that colour just wouldn't capture, I don't think. Next is Charles Laughton's Night of the Hunter, which is one of the more obvious choices, I would think. Charles Laughton, obviously famously, this is the only film he directed. powerhouse performance by Robert Mitchum, but it has that kind of staginess. You can see that a lot of it is in sets, but the black and white cinematography almost makes it realistic. Again, there's a fairy tale quality to Night of the Hunter, and again the blacks are really black, and the street light where Richard Mitchum, that's his brother, Robert Mitchum, appears outside the house with Lillian Gish as she's protecting the children. Just brilliant composition and brilliant black and white cinematography. Next is our two films shot by James Wong Howe, so that's cheating slightly, but he didn't actually direct the films. That's Frankenheimer's Seconds with Rock Hudson, which has a kind of more grittiness. It's not extremely polished black and white cinematography, I wouldn't say. There's still that kind of grittiness, that kind of nightmarish quality. There's a reality to it as well. I think if the cinematography was so polished like Night of the Hunter, it wouldn't have had the same uncomfortable effect as the cinematography in Seconds. And Sweet Smell Success, also shot by James Wong Howe. This is one of the, again, this would be an automatic on most people's lists. This is the epitome of black and white films. The content is poisonous. Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis have never been better. It's acidic and acerbic, cookie full of arsenic, as mentioned in that. The cinematography really brings out the nightlife, the world of newspaper gossip, backstabbing. Again, you just couldn't imagine Sweet Smell Success shot in Technicolor, which obviously was around at the time in the 50s, but it had to be a black and white film. Next is Tarkovsky's Andrei Rublev. Again, you could pick Ivan's Childhood, but again, this really feels like a black and white film. Again, it could have been shot in colour, but there is a real grittiness and dirtiness about the film. Obviously, when it was set, you get a feeling of living in that time, the griminess of it. I knew, obviously, like Hard to Be a God, I think, tries to be Andrei Rublev, and for me isn't that successful at it. But yeah, Tarkovsky, his images last with you for a while. Obviously there is a colour sequence at the end of the film, but the black and white photography, the water, the rain, as in all Tarkovsky films. I mean, you can watch Tarkovsky films once in 10 years and the images from his films are still in your brain. You still occasionally have Tarkovsky dreams, and Andrei Rublev is one of those films, and it's definitively a black and white film. Next is actually a modern one, but I thought I would include it, apart from the fact I really like it. It's The Captain, which bizarrely directed by Robert Svenke, who directed the Red films with Bruce Willis, bizarrely. But this is him with a wonderfully dark story of an imposter at the end of World War II, going a bit mad and doing atrocities with his ragtag group that he brings along, based on a true story, bizarrely, because the truth is usually stranger than fiction. But it was shot on digital and black and white photography, and it really does bounce out, and it's really sharp. Again, could have been shot in colour, obviously it's a modern film, but obviously there are scenes where you probably couldn't get away with shooting it in colour, but again the black and white really amplifies the darkness, the brutality of what's going on. Lots of mud and camps and people being shot in trenches. So that's an example of a modern use of black and white that I think works really well as a stylistic choice. Next is Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. Again, you could probably pick other Kubrick films, Paths of Glory for example, but Dr. Strangelove again has that kind of grittiness. It's not perfectly shot, obviously uses newsreel, not necessarily newsreel footage, but it looks like newsreel footage of external shots, but it's really the stuff in the war room, the shadows that seem to last forever, that kind of diffused white light in the war room. It's just beautiful. On board the bomber with Slim Pickens and James Earl Jones, so there's a kind of reality to it, but in the war room scenes there's an unreality to it that works really well. And again, Dr. Strangelove in colour just I don't think would have the same impact. Next is Kurosawa's Throne of Blood. Again, you could pick lots of Kurosawa films, but Throne of Blood probably because of its material and what it's about. Obviously it's his take on Macbeth, but again, Cobweb Castle, lots of mist and rain. Again, like Tarkovsky, Kurosawa was really good with elements and weather to create a mood. And again, obviously he would do later colour films like Ran and Kagemusha that was, eye-popping, but Kurosawa was best in black and white, and his shot composition in Throne of Blood just shows off all his talents. Toshiro Mifune, which you could argue is perhaps a little bit over the top, as he sometimes is prone to do, but he is going mad technically. But again, another wonderful black and white film in Cobweb Castle. When the forest comes to the Cobweb Castle, it's just beautiful and mysterious and almost supernatural, and it's just a beautiful black and white film. And again, because it's about ambition and the damage that ambition can cause, it suits a black and white film. Next is Last Year in Marienbad, Alain Resnais' Love It or Hate It, art house masterpiece. This blew me away the first time I saw it. One of the greatest edited films ever made, but apart from that, the cinematography is just exquisite. The compositions, specifically in the garden and in certain rooms, is just dazzling. And again, in colour, it just wouldn't have the same impact. It's a film that you can pretty much read as 28 different things, which is one of the reasons I love about it. It's open to interpretation, which the best art can be, and perhaps should be sometimes. Everything shouldn't be explained. Obviously in the Hollywood remake, if that ever happened, then everything would be explained. It's a kind of Chinese puzzle of a film, but its cinematography is absolutely beautiful. Next, it's a Jacques Tourneur, Night of the Demon. Again, couldn't really imagine Night of the Demon in colour, because it's about mist and ghostly monsters appearing and killing people. Yes, the monster isn't that convincing when it actually does appear, but most of the film is inferred, and it's got a creepiness and a weirdness to it. And again, that Jacques Tourneur direction is wonderful. He even gives Dana Andrews a good performance. Yeah, another essential black and white horror film from the 50s. Next up is a horror film in the cusp of the 60s, Mario Bava's Black Sunday. Obviously, Mario Bava, strangely enough, appeared in the colourful colour films list, but he's going to turn up in the black and white list too, because Black Sunday or Mask of Satan, again, Bava usually had no budget, but he made the most of it by using smoke and atmosphere and mirrors. It's just a beautiful, horrible film with Barbara Steele. And again, I mean, Hammer could have remade it in colour, but it really should be black and white, because it's awesome. Next is Bergman with Seven Seal. Again, you could pick a lot of Bergmans, but this is most people's kind of first experience with Bergman. It's arguably his most influential film, his most parodied film. Obviously Bill and Ted were inspired by the Seven Seal. Again, it's about black and white things. It is a very dark film. Again, couldn't imagine Seven Seal in colour. Death's white face wouldn't be quite as white in colour. It's a beautiful film, great film. You know, perhaps we dismiss it a little bit just because it's his most well known. You know, if you ask the average person in the street to name a Bergman film, they'd probably mention Seven Seal. But it's still a masterpiece, it's still a great film. Next is Robert Wise' The Haunting, whose cinematography is just absolutely beautiful. This is a perfect example of Hollywood did remake it in colour, and that was one of the many problems with that remake, because it's just not the same film, it's just not the same feel. You need that creepy black and white cinematography. You can't quite tell what's going on. It's one of the best films as far as sound design. You think you imagine things, specifically the scene with the camera just points at wallpaper, and the use of shadows, the use of strange angles, the use of space. It's a lovely little ghost story, and again, has to be black and white. And speaking of ghost stories, it's The Innocence with Jack Clayton. Again, similar story to The Haunting. The black and white is really crisp. It wouldn't be the same in colour. Again, there's a whole thing in the film with faces and reflected surfaces. It's got that element of, did I just see that out the corner of my eye? Little things are suggested and reflections behind the characters and things like that. And again, colour photography just wouldn't bring that out as well as the black and white does. Next is Carol Reed's The Third Man. Again, probably another obvious choice. In the conversation for my favourite film of all time, for me, it's literally perfect. And Carol Reed's cinematography that he uses in this is just sublime. It's just image after image that is absolutely marvellous. Again, sounding like a broken record, you couldn't make The Third Man in colour. It just wouldn't have the same feel. Again, the black and white just lends itself to the period, lends itself to the corruption, lends itself to the line between good and bad. Obviously the classic night scenes where Harry Lime makes his appearance. The tunnels and the sewers, beautifully lit. Again, just the light on the cobblestones as they're running through the streets. It's just absolutely beautiful and perfect. Next is Clouseau's Ledia Bleak. Again, the first time I saw Ledia Bleak was on television. Wasn't a great print. Had the DVD. Again, wasn't really that good a print. But getting it in Blu-ray is cleaned up. But again, the black and white is really that dirty, grimy, because it is a kind of dirty, seedy film about murder and infidelity. Again, this was remade in colour disastrously in Hollywood. But the original, the black and white, just enhances the darkness that's going on in certain characters, the light that's going on in the poor victim. A wonderfully great misanthropic masterpiece. It's a masterpiece. It has to be in black and white. Next is Louis Malle's debut, Elevator to the Gallows, which again couldn't really be in colour because it just has that 50s, the jazzy score by Miles Davis, photographs in black and white. It just has that quintessential Paris at night. Yeah, again, in broad, shiny colour, just wouldn't work. Next is Buñuel's Exterminating Angel. Again, Buñuel made lots of films in colour, made lots of great films in colour, but he also did great films in black and white, and Exterminating Angel is that. Again, the black and white really enhances what goes on in the room that people are trapped in and can't get out of if you've never seen the film. And again, what's great about Exterminating Angel is there's no explanation. So people make lifestyle changes when they can't escape the room, when they're desperate. And again, the black and white cinematography really amplifies that feeling. Again, of dark forces, and there's no escape, whereas having it bright and shiny colour just wouldn't have the same effect. And finally, you'll be glad to know, Night of the Living Dead by Romero. Again, probably couldn't be in colour for various reasons of people eating people, but it has, on a wider socio-political level, obviously there's elements of black versus white. There's racial undertones to the film, but the white in this film is like that garish, really bright white light. Again, it's a low budget film, and it has that kind of low budget black and white look, if that makes any sense. Probably doesn't. Is it a truly great film? Perhaps not, but its influence we're still seeing today, whether that's good or bad, that's up to you. But the black and white garishness, it's bizarre that it's a garish film, but it's in black and white. We're used to kind of garish Technicolor or various other colours. But Night of the Living Dead is a garish black and white film. Again, with that burning white light, which almost just amplifies the nasty nature of people when they're cornered, which is part of what the film's about. So that's my random list of 20 black and white films that are very black and very white. Please let me know in the comments below your blackest and whitest black and white films. This is one of my fairly daft and pointless films, but never mind. Pointless videos. But please let me know in the comments what films you think of when you hear the words black and white. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying thanks very much for watching, and goodbye.